Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much to Hosni Al-Lakani for the backdrop that he provided. Let me introduce myself. I am José Ángel Arranz, and in the region of Castilla y León, your host region, I'm in charge of the environment. So I'm happy to bid you a welcome to this region. I hope that you benefit from your stay here. I hope you learn a lot, and I hope also that you enjoy yourselves. I'm going to be talking from the vantage point of our experience with things managerial. I'm going to be talking about our responsibility, which is to supervise the management of the territory. We coordinate the activities undertaken by the different stakeholders here. And that being our vantage point, we're also going to try to give some tips as to possible responses to the questions that our moderator asked us to keep in mind. Can you hear me? Yes? It's coming through? Yes? Is the English interpretation coming through? I hope so. I have 10 minutes. Very good. We can restart then. Es esta consola, ¿eh? Let me give you a little bit of background information. We have had local experiences, our territorial experience, what we have seen, what we have witnessed in our region. We can extrapolate solutions that are more global in nature. And very briefly, let me just remind you about something that we have been talking about over the past few days. In our region, the past decades have led to the destruction, if you will, of many of our forests. But this changed. This has changed in more recent years. We've inaugurated the process of recovering our forests. And what's more, now in our region, we know what other Central European countries are witnessing, and that, I think, can best be defined as consolidation. So let me give you an example, I think a very telling example of how our landscape evolves. We're recovering some parts of the landscape which just 50 or 60 years ago were being farmed. These used to be forests and were harvested afterwards and now are recovered as forests. This is in 1950, there were 1.8 million hectares of forest land, and now we see that the number in 2010 is 3.1 million, so that's a little bit over 1/3 of the region. And the trend, I think, continues along those lines. We believe that in the upcoming 30 or 40 years, we will be recovering another possible 1 million hectares. Let's look then at the 21st century. Probably because of our vocation, which has us looking beyond the limits of our region, what we witness is a very changing world. There are two very different types of societies. Look at the difference between a rural society and an urban society. Very different needs regarding a specific landscape. And look at this very different snapshot. See what's happening here. We're managing, in fact, our territory in protected areas, and outside, well, it's all managed. In other words, the hand of mankind is to be appreciated. We have the technique, we have the expertise to have either one or the other model. We need to remember that society has its needs, so we need to think about livestock, we also need to think about conservation of biodiversity, but we need to have sufficient skills in place so as to be able to really decide upon the future of our forests. Also, over these past few decades, we have come up with a list of political priorities. What we want is to achieve is a social integration of the forest. This is one of our main objectives. On the one hand, yes, we do have a rural population, and what they want, of course, is to see rural development. They want to see the fostering of economic activities and job creation. And then there's the city dwellers who want to make public use of forests, who want to foster the use of top quality products that our forests are in fact producing. And then also we have to think about the importance of protecting the forests. Here on our list, it ranks as number 2, but perhaps really in our decalogue, it's priority number 1. We have consolidated figures such as what we call the MUPs, the woodlands for public use and conservation networks. And then number 3, recovery of forests. We consolidate the process. We benefit from nature herself, which is self-healing and self-generating. We successfully ensure that practically 1.2 million new hectares will be added to the current number of forest hectares. And how do we think about going about this? Well, we think about going about this by really coming to terms with what we want and need. We need to have the best possible toolkit. We need to keep in mind what society wants, the demands of rural and urban dwellers. And we need to remember also what the forest gives us. And that's the framework. That's the framework of sustainable development. I think that this is a well-known scheme, and I think that where all of us are really very active, and all of this under the umbrella of governance. We know also that we need to at least attempt to identify some of the new opportunities, our experience, our setting, the needs regarding tourism and entertainment. That's going to be growing. And then bioenergy, as channeled by new alternative sources, we believe that's another very important opportunity. And then seeking to ensure that we produce top quality products that really do add value to the products in question. Again, very good examples that this is a fact of our lives. And also there are, to a less certain degree, other possible opportunities. For instance, the production of good quality water and fixing of CO2. These traditional systems which begin to adapt and which we can actually now begin to specify in numerical terms. So the question then that we pose is, how do we go about actually articulating these different demands? What are the objectives in place? How do we implement them? All the while attempting to satisfy those very different demands, because urban and rural societies are different, and all the while seeking models that will be models to follow, models that will also be rolled out in other different parts of the country. Well, I think many of us are interested in something which is thinking about the territorial approach. So the territorial approach vis-a-vis sustainability. We always try, I think, to find a solution to the questions that our moderator asked us to keep in mind. So there are 2 basic lines of action, if you will. You have the traditional approach, which tries to provide a solution to sustainability issues, and this is from the administration's point of view. In other words, a very legal approach. Legislation regarding land development, legislation regarding forests and conservation. So the government publishes legislation and we comply, and if you don't comply, well, there's enforcement issues to be taken into account. That has been, I think, a very successful approach in the fact, because yes, we in Spain have been able to get our woodlands for public use network, our natural parks, our Natura network. Over 1/4 of the territory is actually included in this network, this ambitious network, with our own proprietary management models. But we also believe, as do many of your good selves, that we should veer towards more holistic models. These are new approaches which are more voluntary in nature. There's participation, there's the very important presence of local approaches. I think that it's all part and parcel of the same set of instruments. We talk about model forests, biosphere reserves, World Heritage forests, another set of possible solutions that will help us in achieving our ultimate objective. And at the end of the day, and perhaps also to keep things simple, what we want to achieve is a series of actions. This is our objective. But these actions undertaken in a very orderly manner, coordinating our activities, availing ourselves of the necessary information, having the necessary budgets, and with due planning. And this, with a clear governance structure, is what I think that we should be pushing for. And in order to so achieve, we need to strengthen the different links in the chain in order to consolidate planning. And also, we need to work on our budgets, look at the financing. We have some suggestions which perhaps might be of interest. We're looking from our local vantage point or a regional, we need to think about seeking synergy with other policies for different types of development. Also, I think it's important to remember that our landscapes, the ones that are best conserved, should defend their importance vis-a-vis other landscapes and territories, because usually we seem to be looking at other landscapes that call for conservation along these lines. And I think that this is a part of our activities that we need to focus on. We need to remember that these areas are very biodiverse, and I'm convinced that society in general, rural and urban, are absolutely essential when it comes to putting our money where our mouths are. And that, I think, is why we need to ensure that our stakeholders are well trained. Another important issue is a local integration of each one of the processes. In other words, establish a strong link with local and regional politicians, with academics, with the media, with markets, and with other sectors that are relevant in territorial terms: water, farming, energy, basically. And all the while fostering new and bringing on board these already existing platforms which have been created in order to provide solutions to these issues. A very important additional element is merging or seeking synergies involving similar processes. So integrating objectives and actions for parks, Natura 2000, etc., and acknowledging, a mutual acknowledgement rather, of our progress, I think would be something that would strengthen our respective presence. And finally now, strengthening or bolstering these projects as part of networks in the face of strategic issues. I think that some of these issues are very telling. We're fighting against climate change. We're trying to ensure that there are better energy sources, a better use to be made of water, social integration of forests, rural development. I think that this, at the end of the day, is a key issue. So to summarize then, I believe that there's a series of key points. These are the priority lines. These models should be of a synergic nature. They should try to bring everything into place. Local leadership, of course, being very important, but with global objectives and coordination at different levels, trying to ensure that our strategic projects be well prepared, duly funded, and attempt, of course, to achieve the best possible development models. In other words, convince society that this landscape, if better conserved, is going to be more useful. In other words, in competitive terms, it's going to be better than a territory or a landscape that is not well conserved. We hope that tomorrow you will actually see what we're describing today. We're managers, and well, managers like to do things. I think that it's better to devote some time to processes, but we need to do. The process is important, but what matters is the ultimate achievement. In other words, we need to walk the talk. We need to ensure that society grasps clearly what the objectives that move us are. So thank you very much. I hope that I've responded to the 3 questions that our friend Hosni posed at the beginning.